You've written on Ezra, Nehemiah, Jeremiah, Ecclesiastes by Solomon. What have some of your biggest takeaways been from them? And it was funny, you mentioned Marduk. I was reading your commentary on Ezra, and I kept misreading it as Marmaduke, and I had to remember he's the dog. Marduk is the god. So I had those mixed up in my own mind a little bit.
Well, Ezra and Nehemiah was one of the first commentaries I have written. So the first publication I had was the New Covenant motif in Jeremiah's Book of Comfort, which was my PhD dissertation. And I was working on the New Covenant, which basically I argued that the New Covenant in Jeremiah is not a brand new covenant, but a renewal of the old covenants in many ways. So it's not brand new. There are some brand new elements, like the law written on the heart. Obviously, that's through the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
But there are many renewal of the elements of the old covenant. Anyway, that was the first one. And Ezra and Nehemiah, I enjoyed that because I got to write about the nice part about the prophets. You know, when you talked about how people give up reading the Old Testament because it's repetitious sometimes. I mean, think about it. Look at all the prophets. They write about three things: sin, judgment, restoration. Sin, right. Judgment, restoration. So he repeats all the time. I had a friend who told me, I stopped reading Jeremiah because it's just about sin and judgment. Well, I said, hey, keep reading, it's coming. So Jeremiah 30 to 36 is to 33 is the good news, the book of comfort, the book of consolation. So in the prophets, God also says to the prophets, you have sinned. Because you have sinned, I'm going to judge you. I'm going to take you into exile. But God also promises restoration. And that's what Ezra and Nehemiah is. Ezra and Nehemiah talks about God's faithfulness in the fact that he actually fulfills his word and he's faithful to the fact that he brings them back to the land. And just like there were three main deportations from Israel to Babylon in 605, 597, 587 BC, there are three returns from exile under Zerubbabel, under Ezra, and then under Nehemiah. And I get to talk about the restoration, how they come back to rebuild the altar, to give sacrifices. They rebuild the temple, they rebuild the wall. And all of these things are miraculous. And by the way, there are so many parallels to the Exodus in the books of Ezra and Nehemiah. It's wonderful to see when you study it. But Ecclesiastes was probably my favorite so far. It's because a lot of people like Ecclesiastes for all the wrong reasons. You know, they say, oh, I love Ecclesiastes because, you know, when I'm depressed, I like to read meaningless, everything is meaningless. Well, the whole point of the book is that apart from a correct relationship with God,
right,
it would be meaningless. That is the point. And I do think that at the end, Solomon sees the light and says, fear God and keep his commandments. That is the whole duty of man. And talk about how Ecclesiastes points to Jesus. Jesus came to redeem us from the meaninglessness Solomon experienced. And, you know, if Solomon says, oh, you know, I hated work, you know, and it's meaningless. No, Jesus comes and says, and we learn in the New Testament that everything we do should be for the glory of God. Or think about what Solomon writes in Proverbs. He first says, he who finds a good wife is a gift from the Lord. And then Ecclesiastes 7:26, he says, more bitter than death is the woman. Like, oh, what happened? Well, what happened is 1,000 women happened. He consistently disobeyed God and his law. That's what happened. So he comes to the end of his life and says everything is meaningless. But I read Jesus and I said, no, that's not my perspective. My perspective is, again, a man and a woman in a covenant relationship before God. A man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife. And again, Jesus is quoting Genesis there. So Jesus redeems us from all the meaninglessness Solomon experienced. Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, and I came that my people have life and have it abundantly. So a lot of people like Ecclesiastes because they want to, maybe quote Ecclesiastes on their bad days, oh, meaningless, everything is meaningless. No, if you are saved, your motto shouldn't be meaningless. Your motto should be John 10. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. That's my motto. It's not meaningless. Apart from a correct relationship with God, everything is meaningless. So if people choose to reject God, then yes, they should sing that refrain. But if we are saved, then we're not singing that refrain. We're singing a different tune.
Yeah. I really enjoyed reading Ezra and Nehemiah together and just watching them kind of. It's almost post-apocalyptic literature to me, because they're coming back into the land and rebuilding it. They build for them the English Channel, a tunnel at two different elevations, and it just happens to meet right in the middle. I mean, as an architect fan, you probably got at least some of joy out of the rebuilding aspect of it.
Yeah, great.